You want to go on that last step, finding a good provider?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This probably would have been a good segue from some of the research stuff. So Dave got a question from someone earlier this week talking about or asking, hey, I had a disc herniation. Am I okay to lift again? Kind of thing. And it was interesting because the same night, someone else from back home in Colorado sent a message like, hey, do you think I'll ever be able to squat X number again with this disc herniation?
Yeah, actually, I want to get on a soapbox for just a moment. And if the guy that asked me this is listening, I don't think he meant anything by this, so no harm, no foul. But people will reach out. It's bad to ask either of us, but especially me because I'm not a clinician. People be like, I got XYZ injury. Any tips? I'm like, first of all, no. Ask a medical professional like Danny. But even if you were to ask Danny that, you don't ask a professional, hey, got any tips over DM? You first ask, can I get on your schedule and pay you for this? Because it's serious. All right. Off my soapbox. Yeah.
Hey, you have 8 years of schooling and 16 years of clinical experience. I know you'll have the answer I need. Give it to me for free.
Yep. No, actually, the analogy.
More than 16 years clinical experience.
The analogy that I made to this guy was like, it's a little bit like asking your plumber friend on his day off, hey, can you just like come over and fix my toilet for free?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
I think Dave is especially protective of me because I started working at PT clinic when I was 15. Like I couldn't drive myself to work. My mom had to drop me off and come pick me up after my shift after soccer practice. At 15, I'm now 35. And I took in particular, there's a school of thought or a kind of a credentialing through Postural Restoration Institute, PRI. And I took my first PRI course before I even started, like 2 years before I started PT school. I think at that time when I emailed them, I was like, hey, like I graduated my undergrad. I'm working in a clinic that uses your methodologies. I really want to learn. What can I do? And they're like, I guess you could take our course, but no one's ever really done this. And when I was first brought on to write for LFT, I started writing at PRI and got completely shit on by lifting bros. And now everyone wants to talk about the diaphragm. So 20 years later, I'm sitting here looking back at people, looking at the research, who these people wanted the research confirmation, and now we have it. 20 years ago, we didn't. 20 years ago, I took my first course based on what someone had put together 15 years before that. So this is a 35-year delay, literally. So I just turned 35. This is literally my entire lifetime of a delay of what we're seeing in the research. Just for perspective for you guys, for anyone who wants to be like super evidence-based. Don't get me wrong, research is important, but like, please, grain of salt.
Anyway, about finding a good provider.
Finding a good provider. So what was the question he asked you?
Well, I mean, after the whole initial, like, got any tips thing, we just briefly talked about finding someone online versus in person. I mean, I gave him your info, but he mentioned that he was in a small town now, but he's moving to a much bigger city for college, and he thought he'd be able to find somebody there. And I said, well, I can't guarantee that'll happen because a lot of times the best people are online. But if you find somebody in person who knows what they're talking about and isn't going to write you off for being a meathead and tell you to just lift light or stop lifting, that can really be a godsend.
Mm-hmm. No, I think actually we should bookmark where we are in time right now because this can be a good segue because there really is a pretty big shift that's happening, especially within the PT and chiropractic community where, 10 years ago, there weren't other PTs that could be in powerlifting or bodybuilding or anything. And now there are a ton. Now anyone that squats 135 wants to say they're a performance therapist. But in as much as there's like, kind of tongue in cheek with that, that is in net, that is a benefit to you as a consumer. And I think that if you're smart and you do your research, you really can get a great care provider. I think this particular person mentioned that he had a family member who was a surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon or a spine surgeon. Yeah. And basically said, like, if you have any sort of a disc herniation, you should never lift ever again.
But actually, even more, I think this is where kind of the conversation kind of ended, but he even started talking about surgery, and I didn't like go down that rabbit hole, but like, I mean, if
don't do it, please don't do it. Please do not.
We're talking about, back surgery here, which you're the expert. I'll let you go on that soapbox if you want.
So you know how like 20 minutes ago, Justin was talking about all the nuances and all the layers of like how we get into these things.
Yeah.
But there are so many good care providers out there. And I think what's really, really cool, as much as literature is behind, as much as research behind, there is a huge effort to try to get up to speed. And there is a huge effort in terms of the chiropractic and physical therapy provider community to try to promote more activity and try to promote resilience and being strong. You to go to clinicalathlete.com. that is one network you can look at, but that's not comprehensive. I mention it to people. I'm not on there because I haven't gone through their like process, whatever. But I think that in general, you know, there's a school of thought that says that if you have any sort of a disc herniation, you know, this, that, and the other, you probably shouldn't lift again. And so many of our listeners, especially if you've ever had a barbell on your back or in your hands, you probably have some sort of a disc herniation, right? Many of us are asymptomatic. Some of us are symptomatic. Many of us have an established behavior, meaning we have some sort of a predictable nature. You know, when you have an exercise in your training program, if you continue to progress it, it starts to bother you. That usually is going to tell you a little bit about whether you're tolerant or intolerant in certain directions. But I'll just use myself as an example because someone asked me the other day, I have this disc herniation. Am I ever going to squat 495 again, beltless again? And I was like, I don't see why not. I just went through a whole series of testing to rule out some other things, other medically related, and they found a pretty significant herniation in my L4 and 4.5. And just this week, I pulled 405 for 11, which is a PR for me.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. And the only back pain I have is because I'm a jerk and I still forget to check my collars. And so no matter what your diagnosis is, I think it's really important that you surround yourself with people who are going to give you a narrative that is intellectually honest, accurate, and also understanding of where you are, where you've been, and where you plan on going. Do not, under any circumstance, allow anyone else to predict your future narrative for you. Unless that person is someone who truly has your best interest at heart and understands what you do as an athlete. There's so much hope to be had, and as much as we kind of shit on research earlier, there's a lot of research that's coming out that's basically saying all these things that, you know, other physicians or PTs or chiros used to kind of like slap these diagnoses on us. There's so much research coming out that basically says those don't matter. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to get yourself in the hands of someone who actually understands, and not to, you know, minimize your pain. Like, pain is a real thing. It's a very strong function of the brain, but there's so many layers that from which it can be understood and modified that there's no reason that you should give up on the thing you want to be able to do. And I don't know. I've seen so many, like, you know, Chow is another great example. He's got this disc herniation. He's a couple hours from me, and I've reached out a couple times, but it's hard when I think the more popular an athlete or coach is, the harder it is to actually help them because everyone wants to be in their ear. And you probably have experienced that as well.
Well, this is the whole industry, not just the rehab stuff.
Yeah, true. But no, finding a good provider. I think most people, and Justin, you can probably resonate with this too. Like, you're someone who people really trust because you're very honest up front. You're not going to sugarcoat things, but you also kind of give it to them straight. And I think a good provider in terms of medical care should be able to do the same.
Yes.
Yeah. I hate thankfully this has never happened to me, and I haven't like been in hospitals, doctor's offices that terribly much in my life, but it seems crazy how often you'll hear people say like, oh, my doctor told me I would never X again. Lift, run, walk. Like,
what do we hear with when I tore my adductor? And again, this is like 10 years ago when we didn't know a lot of other people who'd done it.
Yeah, even Hector said you'd be lucky.
Everyone that I talked to was like, you'd be lucky to squat, you know, 185, 225 again. And this was a doctor who really stayed up on his literature and his research, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for it. But I think we're very, very quick to allow other people to put limitations on us. And if that limitation is coming from someone who doesn't understand what you do and the resilience that goes into getting to where you are at your baseline to begin with, if they don't know what it takes to get to where you are, who are they to put a limitation on where you want to go? That to me just makes no sense.
Yeah. And like, I mean, really good athletes who are large and like, I mean, the bigger and stronger you are, the worse your injuries potentially are, I think. And you see plenty of pro athletes get very hurt and they still come back. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they have resources to hire good doctors and maybe some pharmacological help, but that's kind of not the point. Like, clearly it's possible to come back from a big thing. They just have a lot on the line and they're willing to put a lot into the rehab.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think most people need to drop a ton of money on it, but
you just got to get with the right people.
Yeah.
I think that's why I love, so Branson Lee is a national level bodybuilder who's also a powerlifter and is short-term in Dallas, up towards adductor tendon. And he's been really, really fun for us to train with because we kind of sit there and we joke about like, oh, did you feel this? Were you able to breathe at week 3 kind of thing?
Oh, yeah, same injury.
Yeah, same injury. And it's been really, really cool because you look at someone like that who, you know, for me, I look at the stuff that I'm dealing with. I'm like, thank God I'm a PT because I can like jack myself up and I have the tools to like fix it. But if I didn't have that, I look at someone like Branson and I so admire the determination and respect what it takes to get to that level. I mean, he squatted, I think,
He's 800 some.
8 something in reps post injury.
Yeah, post injury. Some balls right there.
Yeah, no kidding. And it really is amazing what the body can do. So if you're someone who's dealing with an injury and you feel like there's been a limitation put on you, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to seek another opinion and don't be a jerk about it. Don't be weird about it. Don't be like, well, I'm superhuman. I'm actually made of adamantium. That's great, but you're still human. But I do think it's important to have a circle around you of people that you trust, and there are so many great ones on there. There are so many great clinicians that are kind of coming out of the works.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us to an hour. Ready to wrap this up?
So I think that's
good.
Justin.
That was good. No, I'm good. That was a good one. I hope people listen to that whole because that was a good one. I think.
Yeah. Also, anyone who is interested, there will be the first official Team Troponin seminar will be held at Hidden Gym here in Dallas, Texas on February 18th. If you are interested in signing up, we will get you a link. You can find us at troponin.eventbrite.com. Otherwise, remember to check out First Attachment Nutrition. You can use code TROP10 or Troponin10 for a discount there. You can find all of Justin's ebooks and information there. Otherwise, check out teamtroponin.com for more information on where all of this comes from. Thanks, guys, for jumping in. Remember, leave us a comment with any questions you have and know that we will jump onto them as soon as we can.
Yep. Thanks, guys.